Introduction to Inclusive Education. Unit 1. Understanding Special Needs and Inclusive Education. Introduction. Dear learners, this unit deals with the fundamental overviews of children with certain forms of impairment, including developmental deviations of each of the target groups. Sensory impairments, the intellectually different children, communication disorders, the learning difficulties, physical or motor and health-related problems, the behaviorally, emotionally, and socially maladjusted, and children at risk. It also critically investigates the characteristics of inclusive and non-inclusive classroom settings in relation to policies and guidelines in the support systems of education for all. Participation of professionals, parents, regular and special education teachers in supporting education of these children gets emphasis that in turn gives relevant attention to behavior modification, development in social relationships and collaboration in an inclusive classroom/schooling. Unit learning outcomes. On successful completion of this unit, the teacher candidates will be able to explain the nature of difficulties each group manifest, elucidate elements, challenges and benefits of inclusive classroom, value education strategies and policies regarding children with special needs, recognize learners' needs, potentials and difficulties in inclusive schooling, assess and decide on the behavior modification strategies, social relationships and collaboration of team of professionals to facilitate education of all children. Before getting to the lesson, better instructors provide the learners fill the following agree-disagree chart that serves as preliminary session of the lesson/unit. 1. The society where exceptional children live has a sole influence in their growth and development. Agree, disagree, not sure. 2. We find the full expression of society's understanding about exceptional individuals in the public schools. Agree, disagree, not sure. 3. Education in any society is a mirror of that society. Agree, disagree, not sure. 4. There is a strong feeling in our country that all citizens, whatever their special conditions, deserve the opportunity to fully develop their capabilities. Agree, disagree, not sure. 5. All men are created equal. This phrase denotes equality before the law as well as equality of opportunity. Agree, disagree, not sure. 6. Every child has the right to receive help in learning to the limits of his or her capacity, whether that capacity is limited or great. Agree, disagree, not sure. 7. Public schools are required to take the necessary steps to provide an appropriate education to all children, handicapped or not. Agree, disagree, not sure. 8. One of the major challenging factors to include all children in the same setting is school environment, teachers, school admin, learners themselves, etc. Agree, disagree, not sure. 1.1. Overview of students with various special needs. Under this section, we will see in detail the overall characteristics of children with special needs, the sensory impairments, physical/motorically impaired, learning disabilities, intellectual differences, communication disorders, and health-related problems. Factors affecting developmental profiles of these children in the family and environment are examined under each section. Children with certain forms of developmental deviations are those who differ from the average or normal child in many characteristics like mental characteristics, sensory abilities, communication abilities, social behavior or physical characteristics. King attempted to define child with impairment as a person who deviates from the normal or average child in mental, physical, and social characteristics to such a degree that he or she requires a modification of school practices. It is generally agreed that everybody should get equal opportunity to develop his or her personality, mainly when education is concerned. Therefore, these children should get special attention and treatment so that they can develop to their full potential and will become contributing member of a given society. If their potentialities remain undeveloped, that would result in great wastage of human resources. Because of this, we need to make special arrangements to meet the needs of exceptional children. For instructional purposes, children with similar characteristics are grouped together as indicated by different scholars. It is grouped as of the following, and each will be treated accordingly. 1.1.1 Sensory impairments include children with visual and hearing impairments. 1.1.2 Intellectual differences include children with superior abilities and talent, and learners with slow ability or low intellectual capability. 1.1.3 Communication disorders are children with language and speech disorder. 1.1.4 Learning difficulties, developmental or academic learning disorders. 1.1.5 Physical and health-related problems comprise children having physical/motor-related problems or with health-related difficulties. 1.1.6 Emotional and behavior disorders include children with social maladjustment, emotional disturbances, childhood psychoses, etc. 1.1.7 Multiple disabilities and children at risk involve those with severe or manifold disabilities or vulnerable ones due to socially or environmentally intruding barriers. Activity. Think about sensory impairments and imagine its classification. Do you assume that the causes for each category are different? What is deaf and hard of hearing? What are the major differences regarding education of these children? How do you perceive low vision and blindness? Sensory impairments. Sensory impairments are of varied type, among which the auditory and visual impairments are the major ones. Passanella and Carr 1981 defined auditory/hearing impairment as the generic term indicating a continuum of hearing loss from mild to profound, which included the subclassifications of the hard of hearing and deaf. Hard of hearing, a term to describe persons with enough residual hearing to use hearing, usually with a hearing aid as a primary modality for acquisition of language and in communication with others. This condition can adversely affect the child's educational performance to some extent. Deaf, a term used to describe persons whose sense of hearing is non-functional for ordinary use in communication, with or without a hearing aid. It is so severe that the person is impaired in processing linguistic information which adversely affects the educational performance. Although the degree of hearing loss is important, the age when the hearing loss occurs is also important. Individuals who become deaf before they learn to speak and understand language are referred to as prelingually deaf. Those whose hearing impairment occurs after they have learned to speak and understand language are called postlingually deaf. Children with hearing impairment are individuals with different learning styles and abilities who share one common characteristic. Their ability to hear is limited, and this disability may affect cognitive, academic, physical, and communication characteristics. We have entranced earlier the severity of the hearing loss and the age that the loss occurred determine how well a person will be able to interact with others orally. Clearly, students who cannot hear the communications of others will have more difficult time learning through traditional instructional methods. Activity. What are the causal factors for visual impairments and their major impacts on development of a child? Presume answer individually and share view with colleagues in the classroom with the help of your instructor. Indicate what impacts visual impairment may bring on these children. Visual impairments may be congenital, present at birth, or acquired, occurred after birth. Almost half of the children who are blind are disabled because of prenatal factors, mostly hereditary. In general, most of the causes for visual impairment are hereditary or environmental factors. Thus, familiarity with the child's visual impairment can be an asset to a teacher and/or a parent. Visual impairment, as of many professionals in the field, divides persons with visual loss into two: low vision and blindness. Formerly, those with low vision were referred to as partially seeing or partially sighted. A low vision or partially sighted is legally defined as a condition in which one's vision is seriously impaired, defined usually as having between 20/220/7 central visual acuity in the better eye, with correction. Be blind. It is a descriptive term referring to a lack of sufficient vision for the daily activities of life. When educationally defined, these two subcategories of visual impairments are seen as a partially sighted or low vision pupils. These are pupils who, by reason of impaired vision, cannot follow the normal regime of ordinary schools without adaptation to their sight or to their educational development, but can be educated by special methods involving the use of sight. Such pupils use print materials, but may need modifications such as enlarged print or use of low vision aids magnification. Be blind pupils. Those are pupils who are totally without sight or have little vision, and who must be educated through channels other than sight, for example using braille or audio tapes. B. Intellectual differences. Intellectual difference includes those who are intellectually superior and those who are slow to learn. It consists of the gifted and creative, the slow learner, educable mentally retarded, and the severely mentally retarded. Students with superior intelligence are by far different in academic performance to the slow learners or the mentally retarded. Activity. What do you understand of the term mental retardation? Did you ever meet children with mental retardation in your respective classes before? If yes, please communicate what you have observed so far to your classmates. What are the basic tips of reference in defining mental retardation? Can you assume categories of mental retardation and its intellectual and cognitive discrepancies observed? Please discuss thoroughly on the classifications/levels of mental retardation in groups after individual attempts. Analyze this classification in relation education of these children with your class with the assistance of the instructor. The most common definition that was devised and regularly adjusted by American Association on Mental Retardation referred to significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning existing concurrently with deficits in adaptive behavior and manifested during developmental period. As of this definition, 3 main components are helpful in describing the developmental stages of children with mental retardation. These are: A. Significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning. Intellectual functioning is the ability or intelligence used to answer certain questions and to solve problems. Intellectual functioning of individual is determined through standardized intelligence test. That is, through measuring intellectual quotient of the individual by administering IQ tests. The IQ is obtained by dividing the individual's mental age by his chronological age circa of individual, and then multiplying by 100 to get rid of the decimal. Hence, significantly sub-average general intellectual functioning is a score in standardized intelligence test lower than that obtained by 97 to 98% of persons of the same age. B. Deficit in adaptive behavior or skill refers to failure to meet standards of independence and social responsibility expected of the individual's age and cultural groups. Adaptive skill areas currently considered as appropriate in diagnosing mental retardation are communication, self-care, home living, social skills, community use, self-direction, health and safety, functional academic, leisure. C. Developmental period is consistent with definition. This definition states that mental retardation must manifest before the age of 18. Activity. What does intellectually superior mean? Did you ever find children with superior abilities in your respective classes? What were the major performances you have observed? Presume similarities and differences between children with gifted and talented abilities. Can you suggest criteria identifying children with gifted and talented abilities? The intellectually superior children are the gifted and talented ones whose academic performance is higher when compared with classmates. Most of these children are unrecognized and lack attention from teachers and school community for long in our country. Giftedness can be defined as the possession of unusually high intellectual potential or other special talents. The term describes individuals with high levels of intelligence, outstanding abilities, and capacity for high performance. Creativity also represents giftedness. Creativity corresponds to an ability to generate novel ideas and innovative solutions, products that are not merely new and unusual, but are also appropriate in context and valued by others. Thus, creativity, as a form of intelligence, is characterized by advanced, divergent thought and thinking that requires variety of ideas or solutions to a problem when there is no one correct answer, production of many original ideas, ability to develop flexible and detailed responses and ideas. Talented children generally refer to a specific dimension of skill, e.g. musical, artistic, that may not be matched by a child's more general abilities. It is a term that describes individuals who show natural aptitude or superior ability in a specific area without necessarily implying a higher or superior degree of intelligence. Gifted children could be identified, and information is secured through the participation of teachers, peer groups, and school record officers. Therefore, classroom teachers should be involved in any program that is designed to identify the problems of the gifted, and in other intervention strategies. Giftedness can be labeled as a mixed blessing because the psychosocial behaviors and characteristics of the gifted and talented children could be both positive and negative. For example, despite their good behaviors or characteristics, gifted children may present problems for themselves, parents, teachers, or for the community as a whole. Activity. How do we identify communication disorders? What are the developmental deviations observed on children with communication disorders? What is language disorder, and how can you identify it? What is speech disorder, and how can we identify it in classroom situation? Are there any observable difficulties these children manifest? See communication disorders. Communication is the transfer of knowledge, ideas, opinions, and feelings, which is usually accomplished through the use of language. In some other cases, it is transfer of information through glance of an eye, a gesture, or of some other nonverbal behavior. Language is the formalized method of communication by which ideas are transmitted to others. Speech is the vocal production of language, and vocal systems are parts of the respiratory system used to create voice. Any deviation from using language and speech in the formal system of communication leads an individual to language or speech disorder, which is known as communication disorder. Speech is abnormal when it is unintelligible, unpleasant, or interferes with communication. Speech problems mostly occur because of vocal system impairments. The most common developmental speech disorders that interfere with child's education are the following: voice disorders, absence or abnormal production of vocal quality, pitch, loudness, resonance, and/or duration. Articulation disorder, abnormal production of speech sounds, e.g., addition, omission, distortion, subtraction of sounds in a word. Fluency disorders are interruptions in the flow, rate, and/or rhythm of verbal expressions characterized by elongation, repetition, and hesitations formed during communication that interrupt the flow of speech. The two most common developmental deviations of fluency are stuttering and stammering. Language impairment is difficulty or inability to master the various systems of rules and language, which then interferes with communication. It could be delayed or deviant development of comprehension and/or use of the signs and symbols used to express or receive ideas in a spoken, written, or other symbol system. The problem involves language form, content, and use. 3 rule systems characterize it: phonology, morphology, and syntax. Activity. How do you perceive learning difficulties? What are the basic similarities and differences between learning disabilities and related problems like mental retardation and communication disorders? What is/are the major difficulty area of learning disability? What does the term dyslexia implies? What are the major types of learning difficulties/disabilities? Learning difficulties. Learning difficulties. Consider one of the definitions of learning difficulties. Learning difficulty. Disability is a general term that refers to a heterogeneous group of disorders manifested by significant difficulties in the acquisition and use of listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning and mathematical abilities. These disorders are intrinsic to the individual, presumed to be due to the central nervous system dysfunction, and may occur across the lifespan. Problems in self-regulatory behaviors, social perception and social interaction may exist with learning disabilities, but do not by themselves constitute a learning disability. Learning disabilities may occur concomitantly with other handicapping conditions, for example, sensory impairment, mental retardation, serious emotional disturbance, or with extrinsic influences such as cultural differences, insufficient or inappropriate instruction. In general, it has been found out that individuals with learning disabilities show significant variation between their actual performance and the level at which professionals and parents think they should achieve. Individuals' problem may focus on one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in using or understanding language. Any kind of problem exerted in the brain will undoubtedly disturb the whole system, thereby causing a problem in mental and other learning processes. Due to the effect made in the brain, a child may develop language disorder or dyslexia. Reading disability as one of the major learning disability group. Severe malnutrition at an early age can also affect the central nervous system, and hence the learning and development of the child. Moreover, what a child experienced in the home, community, school, etc. can affect attention and other psychological processes related to learning. Activity. What does a physical/motoric related problem mean? How can you identify motorically, physically impaired children from other impairment areas? Enumerate different types of physical, motor-related problems. What are the major health-related problems you may observe in your surrounding? Can you state some of the health-related problems that may interfere with student learning? When shall we say that a child is health-related impairments? Physical and health-related problems. Physical, motor-related difficulties include children with neurological defects, orthopedic conditions, birth defects, developmental disabilities, and conditions that are the result of infection and diseases. It can be categorized as of the following. Neurological-based disorders are those entailed with lesion of central nervous system. They are of varied type, among which seizure disorder, cerebral palsy, spina bifida and traumatic brain injury are the most prevalent ones among our community. Musculoskeletal-related problems are those difficulties arising in the muscle, joints, joinary fluids and skeleton. One of the best examples is Hansen's syndrome, commonly known as leprosy. Arthritis and different inflammations around joints, Are the others common around rural Ethiopia? Health-related impairments are those problems which occur on the individual frequently or progressively and always interfere with the individual's development, education and daily activities. The most common ones are asthma, HIV/AIDS, TB, heart failure, nausea, kidney problem, etc. Accident-based physical, motor disabilities are problems occurring on an individual any time in life that hampers development and daily living of an individual at any moment. Most of these types occurred by nature or due to some forms of damage to the body parts, e.g., amputation. The causes of physical disabilities and health impairments can be recognized as biological causes, infections and toxins, injury, socio-economic and environmental factors. Even though these factors cannot be totally prevented, the disabling effects can be lessened to a great extent. Therefore, teacher candidates should be alert following developmental deviations they are observing on their children and act accordingly. Activity. What are the major types of behavior disorders? What is the behavioral manifestations and acting out deeds of the behaviorally and emotionally disturbed children? How can you rate, identify duration, magnitude and topographic measures of developmental deviations of children with behavior and emotional disorders? What are the personal factors leading to emotional or behavioral disturbances? Emotional and behavior disorders. Children with behavior and emotional disorders are referred to by a variety of terms such as emotionally disturbed, socially maladjusted, psychologically disordered, emotionally handicapped or even psychotic, if their behavior is extremely abnormal or bizarre. Such children are seldom really liked by anyone. Worse still, they do not even like themselves. They are difficult to be around, and attempt to be the only friend. That may lead to rejection, verbal abuse, or even physical attack. Some of the problems associated with behavior difficulties include disruptiveness, tantrums, anxiety and depression. Although children with behavioral difficulties are not physically disabled, they're noxious and or withdrawn. Behavior can be as serious as a handicap to their development and learning. The term behavior difficulties or disorder means a condition exhibiting one or more of the following characteristics over a long period of time, and to a marked degree, which adversely affects educational performance. Inability to learn, which cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory and health factors. An inability to build or maintain satisfactory interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers. Inappropriate types of behavior or feelings under normal circumstances. A general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression, or a tendency to develop physical symptoms, or fear associated with personal or school problems. The term does not include children who are socially maladjusted, unless it is determined that they are seriously emotionally disturbed. Definition and classification of emotional disturbance are necessarily quite different for children than for adults. A coalition of more than a dozen professional associates and advocacy organization provided a definition for behavior disorder which represents the best current thinking in the field. The term emotional or behavioral disorder is defined as a disability characterized by behavioral or emotional responses in school programs so different from appropriate age, cultural norms that it adversely affects educational performance, including academic, social, and vocational or interpersonal skills. Hence, the disorder is more than a temporary, expected response to stressful events in the environment, is consistently exhibited in two different settings, at least one of which is school-related, and persists despite individualized interventions within the education program, unless in the judgment of the team, the child's or youth's history indicated that such interventions would be effective. Emotional or behavioral disorders can coexist with other disabilities. This category may include children or youth with schizophrenic disorder, affective disorders, anxiety disorders, or other sustained disturbances of conduct or adjustment. Activity. What are multiple disabilities and its multiplicity? Who are children at risk? Did you observe any child with multiple disabilities in your surrounding? What type is it? How do you observe children at risk in your respective classes? Do you find any developmental difficulties observed on this child? Does the difficulty interfere with the child's education? How is behavioral manifestation of these children similar to that of others? Relate the case. G. Multiple disabilities and children at risk. Multiple and severe difficulties include individuals with various combinations of impairments such as cerebral palsy and mental retardation, deafness and blindness, mental retardation and seizure disorders, etc. Most of the children with multiple and severe impairments have difficulties of walking or speaking, controlling their body balance, or depend chiefly on environmental modification for education. Hence, these children can use regular education with certain adaptations in their surroundings. Most of the severely and profoundly mentally retarded children develop multiple disabilities because of the severity of their difficulty. These children show progressive developmental disorders that highly interfere with their cognitive, physical, academic and social development in all affairs of life. When such conditions faced in school situations, inclusive education teachers are advised to work with teams of professionals in assisting education and appropriate developmental procedures of these children. High-quality early interventions are designed to combat the factors that threaten child development. If learning begets learning, then interventions at younger ages have great potential to generate cumulative benefits by altering a child's future developmental trajectory, even if only a portion of the detrimental consequences facing at-risk children in the school-age years and in adulthood can be averted. The benefits from effective early intervention programs can be substantial. These early indicators of disadvantage, which affect as many as 1 of every 5 children, have implications for how prepared children are when they first enter school at kindergarten. While there is no single definition of school readiness, experts agree that readiness is a multifaceted concept that goes beyond academic and cognitive skills to include physical, social, and emotional development, as well as approaches to learning. 1.2. Definition of inclusive education and support system. This subsection deals with the underlying definitions of inclusive education and the support system in an inclusive classroom. Basic principles underlying inclusive classroom and related issues regarding rights of children with special needs will be stated. Definitions with respect to different countries and institutions were presented for comparison purpose in relation to right of children having access of education in their neighborhood schools. Activity. What is inclusive education? Define inclusion in your own terms. Is there any difference between mainstreaming and inclusion? Do you believe that there is great difference between inclusive and non-inclusive schooling? Elucidate with evidence. Can you imagine principles of inclusion? What the basic human rights to education are as stated in the law? What are the basic principles to inclusive education? Many children will have special educational needs of some kind at some time during their education. Schools and other organizations should be able to help most children overcome their difficulties quickly and easily. But a few children will need extra help for some or all of their time in school. Many years ago, special classes were created for students with special needs. Special educators felt that if they could just teach these students separately, in smaller groups, they could help them to catch up. However, the reality is that students in segregated special education classes have fallen further and further behind. Over time, we have learned that inclusive education is a better way to help all students succeed than non-inclusive classes. It is a basic human right that all people should have education without discrimination. All human life is valuable, and it is morally wrong to place a higher value on those who are unimpaired against those who have some discernible impairment. It is often impossible to be accurate about the potential of any individual from an early age, much less the potential of someone with an impairment that may only result in delayed development rather than none at all. Much impairment does not prevent an individual from learning and going on to lead a fully productive life. Those who are severely impaired need education in order to become as independent as possible. Society needs to value human traits other than those which lead solely to the generation of income. Webster J. 2005 defined inclusion as is the educational practice of educating children with disabilities in classrooms with children without disabilities. Inclusion is an educational approach and philosophy that provides all students with community membership and greater opportunities for academic and social achievement. Inclusion is about making sure that each and every student feels welcome and that their unique needs and learning styles are attended to and valued. According to Grayson 1999, an inclusive school is one that educates all students in the mainstream. Every student is in regular education and regular classes. The focus is on how to develop regular school and classroom communities that fit, nurture, and support the educational and social needs of every student in attendance. An inclusive school is a place where everyone belongs, is accepted, supports, and is supported by his or her peers and other members of the school community in the course of having his or her educational needs met. Experience in many countries demonstrates that the integration of children and youth with special educational needs is best achieved within inclusive schools that serve all children within a community. It is within this context that those with special educational needs can achieve the fullest progress and social integration. Salamanca Framework for Action, 1994. According to the Salamanca definition, an inclusive school recognizes that every child is different. Every child has also unique learning needs, celebrate differences, responds to the individual educational needs of all children, provides equal opportunities to education for all, provides education that promotes quality of living for oneself and others, promotes quality in learning and teaching. An inclusive school is a place where everyone belongs, is accepted, supports, and is supported by his or her peers and other members of the school community in the course of having his or her educational needs met. An inclusive school is flexible. It recognizes that the school system, not the child, is the problem. It is about whole school transformation. Hence, inclusive schools benefit all children. At no time does inclusion require the classroom curriculum or the academic expectations to be watered down. On the contrary, inclusion enhances learning for students, both with and without special needs. Students learn and use their learning differently. The goal is to provide all students with the instruction they need to succeed as learners and achieve high standards, alongside their friends and neighbors. The teacher facilitates the learning by encouraging, prompting, interacting, and probing with good questioning techniques, such as "How do you know it's right? Can you show me how?" The teacher provides 3-4 activities that address the multiple learning styles and enables students make choices. The classroom is a beehive of activity. Students should be engaged in problem-solving activities. The classroom that is child-centered is based on learning centers. The goals are always clearly stated prior to students engaging in learning activities. The teacher will ask students for reminders about the acceptable noise level, learning goals, and what completed tasks look like. The teacher again facilitates the learning throughout the centers and focuses on some specific centers. For inclusion to truly succeed, special educators and general educators need to work closely together and compromise. It definitely requires that teachers have training and support to overcome the challenges they must meet together. 1.3 Elements and characteristics of inclusive classrooms. This section deals with basic characteristics or features of inclusive education and elements underlying inclusive classrooms. Most of the elements relevant in inclusive education, the support system, places, situation and social context, also get attention under this section. Activity. What are fundamental features of inclusive education? Can you visualize certain elements of inclusion? Determine social milieux of inclusive education. Features or characteristics of inclusive schooling. Students need to be active, not passive learners. Children should be encouraged to make choices as often as possible. A good teacher will allow students some time to flounder, as some of the most powerful learning stems from taking risks and learning from mistakes. Parental involvement is crucial. Students with disabilities must be free to learn at their own pace and have accommodations and alternative assessment strategies in place to meet their unique needs. Students need to experience success Learning goals need to be specific, attainable, and measurable and have some challenge to them. Inclusion in school requires a shift in the paradigm. Instead of getting the child ready for the regular class, the regular class gets ready for the child. It's not a decision of 0 or 100%, but whatever balance that can be achieved to maximize meeting all of a child's needs. The regular class is not looked at as how it is, but how it can be. Adaptations are made to the materials, the curriculum and/or the expectations of the activities for the individual child, maintaining achievement of all individual and academic goals. The purpose isn't simply social or academic, but to meet all of a child's needs together wherever possible. Elements of inclusion. Where students learn. All students with disabilities are members of their neighborhood school. All students are assigned to age-appropriate grades in heterogeneous classrooms. Student grouping and regrouping during the course of the day is based on the individual interests and skills of all students, and not on disability labels. Support students receive. Related services e.g., physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy are delivered in regular classroom settings and other school environments. Supports and services are provided in the classroom and coordinated with ongoing instruction. The provision of supports for students' instructional, curricular, behavioral, etc. is viewed as a school-wide need. Instructional planning and implementation. Effective teaching strategies and differentiated instruction are used to meet the needs of every child and accommodate the learning styles of all children in the class. The general education instruction and curriculum is used as the base for accommodations and modifications to meet IEP goals. The instructional materials used for typical students are modified for assignments, homework, and tests. Social relationships. Planned and structured activities are in place to promote social inclusion and friendship development. Students without disabilities are supported in welcoming students who have disabilities. Staff actions. Collaboration among general educators, special educators, and other school personnel occurs on an ongoing basis. School administrators provide a vision and leadership and welcome all students into their school. 1.4 Benefits and challenges of inclusive schooling. This section briefly discusses on advantages and challenges of inclusive education. It also focuses on the challenges teachers face when employing inclusive classroom practices, which basically faced novice teachers. Advantages of inclusive education to both children with and without disability were mentioned. Very few suggested solutions to the difficulties from certain countries' experience were also included under this section. Therefore, teacher candidates are advised to visualize the challenges and try to suggest on-to-be solutions before reading the summary notes. Activity. Do you believe that educating all children in an inclusive schooling has benefit? Enumerate the advantages and disadvantages of inclusive education. What are the major anticipated challenges you presume a regular or special education teacher may face in inclusive classrooms? What is your personal response to minimize the inevitable challenges you may face in inclusive classrooms? The benefits of inclusive education. are numerous for both students with and without disabilities. Benefits of inclusion for students with disabilities include friendships, increased social initiations, relationships and networks, peer role models for academic, social and behaviour skills, increased achievement of IEP goals, greater access to general curriculum, enhanced skill acquisition and generalization, increased inclusion in future environments, greater opportunities for interactions, higher expectations, increased school staff collaboration, increased parent participation. Families are more integrated into community. The benefits of inclusion for students without disabilities include meaningful friendships, increased appreciation and acceptance of individual differences, increased understanding and acceptance of diversity, respect for all people, prepares all students for adult life in an inclusive society, opportunities to master activities by practicing and teaching others, greater academic outcomes, all students' needs are better met, greater resources for everyone. There is no any research that shows negative effects from inclusion. Done appropriately with the necessary supports and services for students to actively participate and achieve IEP goals. Bunch and Valeo, 1997. Reduced fear of common differences, accompanied by increased comfort and awareness, show the following imperatives as stated by these authors: growth in social cognition, improvements in self-concept, development of personal principles, warm and caring friendships. The following are some of the additional advantages of inclusive schools. It is much cheaper than building a lot of separate schools for children with special needs. It encourages the integration of children with special needs, which helps to build an inclusive society. It allows other children in the school learn about the abilities of children with disabilities. It encourages the involvement of parents and the community. It improves teaching. What are the top challenges teachers faces in a special needs inclusive classroom? Let's take a closer look. Lack of experience in an inclusion setting. Some teachers have not been exposed to special needs classrooms, and this can be a disadvantage. Educators need to coordinate efforts and understand the needs of the classroom in terms of developing skills and lesson plans. Lack of experience dealing with severe and profound disabilities. Students with severe and profound require more adaptation and medical attention than the average student. Teachers must be skilled in handling severe disabilities and create lesson plans based on individual abilities and adhere to dietary needs of the child. Lack of experience can lead to the child not progressing with skills or cause of adverse medical incidents, including all students in all activities. Special needs inclusion classrooms must be able to involve its students in all classroom activities. Teachers need to address how the classroom will communicate with each other and encourage participation. If there is a lack of adaptive equipment or adaptive communication and language tools, it makes it difficult for teachers to function as a united classroom. Educating students with less severe disabilities. When there are children of all abilities in the classroom, both physical and academic, children in the middle can easily fall between the cracks. These children can have learning disabilities, hearing impairments, add attention deficit disorder or language delays, to name a few. Providing the right amount of attention and adaptation can be challenging, especially if there is a higher teacher-to-student ratio. Dealing with death. Death is difficult for any teacher to explain to their classroom. When you have a special needs inclusive classroom, there may be students with chronic illnesses and teachers may have to deal with the death of a student. Shortage of teacher aides. Normally, inclusive classrooms have a regular educator and special needs educator. Due to the nature of the classroom and size, it is imperative that there be an appropriate number of teacher aides to assist the teachers with day-to-day activities. Teaching compassion to students. Not all students have been exposed to persons with special needs, and this becomes a challenge to teachers. Teachers must not tolerate insensitiveness and cruelness, and teach that all students are to be treated with respect, regardless of ability. Dealing with parents of typically developing students. As some students are not used to dealing with persons with special needs, parents are no exception. Teachers need to convey to parents how the classroom is conducted, and that all educational needs will be met. Individualized lesson plans. Because there are varying abilities in the classroom, teachers can be challenged to address individual academic needs based on ability. Coordinating therapies. A special needs inclusion classroom needs to be well organized and allow for students to attend therapy sessions. However, this becomes a challenge in planning day-to-day activities and keeping all students engaged and learning. Although many schools are moving towards special needs inclusive classrooms, there are a number of issues or challenges that need to be addressed. Preparing and training a teacher is the first step in making special needs inclusive classrooms a success. As of Howard Gerber, 2011, a classroom teacher is expected to select educational methodology to best suit each student. This is a challenging goal for one teacher who potentially has more than 30 students in each of 5 to 7 classes. The biggest problem for special education teachers who have students in inclusive classrooms is being available to every student. In a classroom of 30, with 1 or 2 special education students, it can be difficult for the classroom teacher to give the individual time and attention the students require and deserve. If the teacher is focusing on the special needs students, the students who need a more challenging environment may be overlooked because they are able to succeed with minimal assistance. If a special education teacher has 50 students who are distributed through 15 classes during any given period, there is no way to assist every student every day. The framework proposed here for meeting the challenges of an inclusive classroom includes the following components. 1. Defining a school philosophy. 2. Using classroom inquiry and action research. 3. Commitment to ongoing teacher education. 4. Promoting teaching excellence. 5. Professional development for administrators. 6. Designing an integrative curriculum. 7. Monitoring of student progress. 8. Using effective assessment procedures. 9. Increasing family involvement. 10. Emphasizing the development of non-academic skills. 11. Introducing students to role models. And 12. Identifying future directions. In addition to the above aforementioned points, the following are to be considered in reducing the challenges of inclusive classrooms, helping children master the functional, emotional capacities. In order to help children master each of the functional emotional capacities, try to meet each child at his own level of development, foster that stage, and enable the child to move on to the next level. Tailor the environment to each child's strengths and weaknesses and help all the children, special needs or not, to build greater competency. Interact with children in ways that help them to think and problem solve at their own levels. These interactions need to be a part of ongoing, trusting, intimate relationships that children have with you and with each other, observing and sharing information, in addition to any information you might be given about the special needs of different children in your group. You should use your own observations in these early days of school to see how each child is functioning. Sometimes in a new environment, children will be anxious and not able to implement the capacities they already have. Parents can be very helpful here. Learning in small groups, children need to develop certain abilities before they are able to work together in large groups. These include the ability to interact with one another with some degree of attention, to use simple purposeful gesturing such as taking to you by the hand and pointing to something they want, to discuss ideas logically and to answer why questions. Do a learning center check. Be sure that the learning centers in your classroom focus on different processing skills, and that the materials in them can be adapted to meet the needs of children who are at varying developmental levels. It is also important to utilize strategies such as vision building, circle of friends, maps, paths, self-determination, and person-centered planning to build successful inclusion. 1.5 Policies and strategies regarding education of children with special needs. Under this subunit we will see policy directions of different countries and strategies employed to assist education of children with special needs. The questions of right to education nationally and internationally also obtain attention. Policies and strategies employed by international organizations and conferences held at UN will be discussed. Activity: what do you understand of the declarations and policies regarding access of education for all children irrespective of abilities and disabilities? What is the policy direction of our country in reference to education for all and inclusive education? What does the right of all children to education signifies? Is there any relationship between Salamanca Declaration and education policy of our country in relation to education for all? The Salamanca Conference Resolution on Policy, Art 15 states the following: integrated education and community-based rehabilitation represent complementary and mutually supportive approaches to serving those with special needs. Both are based upon the principles of inclusion, integration, and participation, and represent well-tested and cost-effective approaches to promoting equality of access for those with special educational needs as part of a nationwide strategy aimed at achieving education for all. EFA. Countries are invited to consider the following actions concerning the policy and organization of their education systems. The same statement on schools and curriculum follows Art 2634 of Salamanca Resolution. 26. Developing inclusive schools. that cater for a wide range of pupils in both urban and rural areas requires the articulation of a clear and forceful policy on inclusion together with adequate financial provision, an effective public information effort to combat prejudice and create informed and positive attitudes, an extensive program of orientation and staff training, and the provision of necessary support services. Changes in all the following aspects of schooling, as well as many others, are necessary to contribute to the success of inclusive schools: curriculum, buildings, school organization, pedagogy, assessment, staffing, school ethics and extracurricular activities. 27. Most of the required changes do not relate exclusively to the inclusion of children with special educational needs. They are part of a wider reform of education needed to improve its quality and relevance, and to promote higher levels of learning achievement by all pupils. The World Declaration on Education for All underscored the need for a child-centered approach aimed at ensuring the successful schooling of all children. The adoption of more flexible adaptive systems capable of taking fuller account of the different needs of children will contribute both to educational success and inclusion. The following guidelines focus on points to be considered in integrating children with special educational needs into inclusive schools. 28. Curricula should be adapted to children's needs, not vice versa. Schools should therefore provide curricular opportunities to suit children with different abilities and interests. 29. Children with special needs should receive additional instructional support in the context of the regular curriculum, not a different curriculum. The guiding principle should be to provide all children with the same education, providing additional assistance and support to children requiring it. 30. The acquisition of knowledge is not only a matter of formal and theoretical instruction. The content of education should be geared to high standards and the needs of individuals with a view to enabling them to participate fully in development. Teaching should be related to pupils' own experience and to practical concerns in order to motivate them better. 31. In order to follow the progress of each child, assessment procedures should be reviewed. Formative evaluation should be incorporated into the regular educational process in order to keep pupils and teachers informed of the learning mastery attained, as well as to identify difficulties and assist pupils to overcome them. 32. For children with special educational needs, a continuum of support should be provided, ranging from minimal help in regular classrooms to additional learning support programs within the school and extending, where necessary, to the provision of assistance from specialist teachers and external support staff. 33. Appropriate and affordable technology should be used when necessary to enhance success in the school curriculum and to aid communication, mobility, and learning. Technical aids can be offered in a more economical and effective way if they are provided from a central pool in each locality where there is expertise in matching aids to individual needs and in ensuring maintenance. 34. Capability should be built up and research carried out at national and regional levels to develop appropriate support technology systems for special needs education. states that have ratified the Florence Agreement should be encouraged to use this instrument to facilitate the recirculation of materials and equipment related to the needs of people with disabilities. Concurrently, states that have not adhered to the agreement are invited to do so in order to facilitate the recirculation of services and goods of educational and cultural nature. Article 3.2.9 of Ethiopian Education and Training Policy states the following: special education and training will be provided for people with special needs. UNESCO paper on inclusive education regarding Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Kenya states the following: the Ethiopian government is committed to achieve the Millennium Development Goals (MDGs) and Education for All (EFA) goals. The main focus is on providing primary education of good quality for all citizens by 2015. The Education and Training Policy 1994, in line with the Constitution, directs implementation and development towards inclusive education, education for all, states that expansion of quality primary education to all citizens. Education is not only a right, but also a guarantee for development, requires universalizing primary education and expansion of secondary and higher education, assures that disadvantaged groups will receive special support in education. 1.6 Identification and assessment of learners' needs, potentials and difficulties. This section mainly focuses on the identification of learners' need, preferences, potentials and difficulties they face personally, socially, and environmentally. It only highlights their needs, referring to their difficulties as impairment, disabilities and handicapping situations. Activity: what are the underlying causes of impairment for learners with special needs? Is there any relationship between child's impairment and disabilities? What are the handicapping situations for children with special needs? Can we/you able minimizing the impairment, disability and handicapping situations these children faces at some stage in schooling? How? What is the relationship and difference between these three terminologies? Impairment refers to any loss or lack of psychological, physiological, or anatomical structure or function. It is an abnormality of body structure, appearance, organ or system functioning. Examples of impairment include amputations, mental illness, nearsightedness, arthritis, illness where joints are stiff, dementia. Madness. Disability is any restriction or lack of ability resulting from impairment to perform an activity in the manner or within the range considered normal for a person of the same age, culture, and education. It is the consequence of impairment in function or performance and activity. Simply stated, a disability is a performance deficit within the physical and social environments that is the result of impairment. Examples of disability: reading, seeing, difficulty seeing, inability moving. Handicap. A handicap is a disadvantage for a given individual resulting from an impairment or disability that limits or prevents the fulfillment of the role that is typical depending on age, gender, and social or cultural factors for that individual. NB. All impairment does not result in a disability, e.g., paralysis of the lower limbs is a vocational disability for a dancer, But the same impairment is not a disability for a bookkeeper. It is the disadvantage which is reflected in interaction with and adaptation to the surroundings. It refers to the societal level, the environmental and societal deficits influenced by social norms and social policy. The term handicap means a loss of limitation to take part in the life of the community on an equal level with others. It describes the encounter between the person with a disability and the environment. The purpose of this term is to emphasize the focus on the shortcomings in the environment and in many organized activities in society, for example, information, communication, and education, which prevent persons with disabilities from participating on equal terms. A handicap is characterized by a difference between what the individual appears able to do and the expectations of the particular group of which he or she is a member. There are various factors that reinforce societal expectations that excuse or prohibit a person with disabilities from performing activities of which the individual is capable. Misconceptions, especially underestimation, refusal to accommodate to an impairment skill level, unwillingness to allow the person to continue to do those tasks which he still can do. Factors that prohibit a person with disabilities from functioning in appropriate social roles include lack of job opportunities and unavailable social support systems. The state of being handicapped is strongly influenced by existing social values and institutions arrangements. Environments that handicap a person include inaccessible public buildings, lack of wide-door bathrooms, lack of accessible public transportation, negative public attitudes towards persons with disabilities. You can refer to the following example. When someone is nearsighted impairment, difficulty seeing is disability. If she or he is unable to get spectacles, handicapped. There are 3 factors that are important for teachers to understand regarding needs of students with disabilities. Severity of the impairment suggests the extent of involvement of a condition. For students with sensory impairments, severity relates closely to communication ability and experiential background. Students with more severe sensory impairments are likely to use different methods of communication and assistive techniques for mobility. Visibility of a disability brings unwanted attention. Unfortunately, this attention focuses on the perceived negative features of an individual. For many students, this attention causes them to feel devalued. The age at which students acquire a disability has a profound effect on certain skills and abilities, e.g., language acquisition or concept development. Age also affects how students handle their condition and how educational personnel should address the condition. The criterion to measure the adaptive behavior of a child can vary from place to place. Hence, people in different places may differ in their attitudes towards a child with mental retardation and in their definitions of the level of the child's retardation. This is due to the fact that the expectation people attach to the child's performance can differ from place to place. In Ethiopia, for example, where there are a great number of tribes, cultures, beliefs and religions, the expectation to the child can vary in these different parts. The expectations of rural areas, for instance, are not necessarily the same as the expectations people give to a child with mental retardation in urban areas. In rural areas, where the tradition is farming, a child with mental retardation may be less socially handicapped than is a child with physical disability. This is due to the fact that in rural areas survival largely depends on different physical activities rather than on mental abilities, and the child with mental retardation may fit into the life and production of the community. On the other hand, in cities where mental ability is highly valued, the same child may become socially handicapped because the successful integration into society often depends on mental ability rather than on physical fitness. As a result, the attitude towards a child with mental retardation also will differ from place to place depending on the child's ability to fulfill the expectations typical for a specific place. It is not a surprise to learn that hearing impairments can result from illness or injury. For example, continuous loud noise can cause a hearing loss. Some types of hearing impairments are the result of heredity. For educators, understanding the causes of hearing impairments is useful. Teachers need this knowledge to plan educational programs for specific youngsters. For example, if a child has a conductive hearing loss, hearing aids might be able to amplify sound sufficiently that the student can profit from oral instruction in the typical classroom. Children with hearing impairment should not be stereotyped. They are individuals with different learning styles and abilities. However, they share one common characteristic. Their ability to hear is limited, and this disability may affect cognitive, academic, physical, and communication characteristics. We have entranced earlier the severity of the hearing loss and the age that the loss occurred determine how well a person will be able to interact with others orally. Clearly, students who cannot hear the communications of others will have more difficult time learning through traditional instructional methods. In developing countries such as India and countries in Africa, the major causes of blindness are infections, disease, malnutrition, and vitamin A deficiency. Worldwide, about 80% of childhood blindness is caused by poor nutrition or infections. Most of these situations can be prevented. However, professionals who try to improve health care in these countries often battle on two fronts: improving health and disproving local myths. Many people in developing countries cling to superstitions about disabilities. Visual impairments may be congenital, present at birth, or acquired, occurred after birth. Almost half of the children who are blind are disabled because of prenatal factors, mostly hereditary. Researchers are beginning to identify genes that cause some forms of blindness, which is the first step leading to a care. For example, the gene that causes retinitis pigmentosa has now been located and will soon be isolated. Tumors in the retinal longua, or along the optic nerve, are other causes of blindness or severe visual impairments in school-aged children. Rubella, also a significant cause of congenital visual impairments and multiple disabilities in the post, can today be prevented by a vaccine. Unfortunately, not everyone is immunized. Your child might manifest normal mental and physical growth and posture. Temper tantrums and sudden outbursts of anger shouting obscenities, throwing things, screaming, crying, disrupting others, constantly asking questions, teasing other children are just a few of the ways that peevish children manifest. Learning these overwhelmingly behaviors on one edge: shyness, anxiety, depression and social withdrawal, that provokes rejection and exclusion by classmates and peers, marks the other edge. Whatever forms the specific type of behavior takes, children manifesting the stated and the like form of behavior are sometimes described as having behavior problems or serious emotional disturbance. These children are referred to by a variety of terms such as emotionally disturbed, socially maladjusted, psychologically disordered, emotionally handicapped or even psychotic, if their behavior is extremely abnormal or bizarre. Such children are seldom really liked by anyone. Worse still, they do not even like themselves. They are difficult to be around, and attempts to befriend or may lead only to rejection, verbal abuse, or even physical attack. Some of the problems associated with behavior difficulties include disruptiveness, tantrums, anxiety and depression. Although children with behavioral difficulties are not physically disabled, their noxious and or withdrawn behavior can be as serious as a handicap to their development and learning. Although behavior disorder in children has been recognized as a problem in psychiatry and special education for well over a century, there is no definition of behavior disorder that is generally agreed upon by professionals. There are many conditions that cause physical disabilities and health impairments. The causes may range from clear mechanical issues, e.g. accidents, to complex genetic matters. Many physical disabilities and health impairments are relatively easy to prevent. Even if the condition cannot be totally prevented, the disabling effects can be lessened. The most common neurological impairment encountered in the school is epilepsy. It is a disorder in which there is a tendency for recurrent seizures, spontaneous abnormal discharge of the electrical impulses of the brain. The frequency of seizures may vary from a single isolated incident to hundreds in a day. There are some common characteristics shared by gifted and talented children. Common descriptors apply to the group of learners who are called gifted. Under the most common definitions, these individuals are very bright and demonstrate their bright intellectual abilities by scoring well on tests of intelligence, learning more quickly than their peers, and applying complex thinking skills. Their academic achievement is higher than their classmates. Like all exceptional children, gifted and talented children need special help to reach their potential, to fully succeed in schools and in life in general. Although no one special program could meet the individual needs of all the children, the diversity we find among gifted youngsters is reflected in the number and type of adaptations the schools are making to meet their special needs. Gifted and talented children need special instructional techniques, teaching materials, classroom arrangement and teachers. As a result, many children from disadvantaged backgrounds fail to meet grade-level expectations on core subjects. For example, national educational assessments at grades 8 and 12 show that about 50% of children from at-risk backgrounds, e.g., low parental education or low family income, score below the basic level of reading and math achievement. indicating that they have less than partial mastery of the knowledge and skills fundamental for proficient work at that grade level. Other manifestations of problems in school achievement for disadvantaged children include higher rates of special education placement, grade repetition, and dropping out of school. Wigan, 2006. 1.7. Behaviour modification, social relationships and collaboration in an inclusive classroom/schooling. This section involves with behaviour modification strategies and the educational intervention of children with special needs. The social relations to be built in assisting these children in inclusive classroom settings, and collaborations to be made between peers, team of professionals including teachers, family and other community members. Activity: what is your understanding by classroom modification? Describe benefits and challenges to classroom modifications. What does conducive learning environment implies? How do you lessen barriers in schools and surrounding to make conducive learning atmosphere and inclusive schooling / why is collaboration important in assisting education of all children and minimizing barriers to inclusive classroom? Whom do you believe are responsible collaborating? Various environmental forces have impact on exceptional children. These forces include the family, the school and associated treatment programs and the larger society. Their impact changes as the child develops. The family may be more important in early years, while society is more important in later years. Schools have very great influence upon the developing child. They are centers for learning, which provide opportunities for the child for acquiring knowledge and skills that will allow him or her to adapt to the society as an adult. Besides, there are social training grounds, where children get opportunities to learn how to respond to adult requirements, to interact with peers, to form friendships, and to learn how to work cooperatively with others. Schools are greatly important for exceptional children, since they may need very special kinds of assistance to become productive adults. Sometimes, schools may not welcome exceptional children. Hence they should be reminded by parents and responsible government bodies to offer the required education for these children. Though formerly these children were excluded from schools as they did not fit into the established program, or the programs did not meet their special needs, in recent years the schools become more innovative in seeking ways to carry out their responsibilities. There is a shift in society also from rejection and charitable isolation of children with special needs to the acceptance of them as contributing members of society, forming inclusive schooling and community. At present there is change in societal attitudes towards children with special needs, which is brought by legislations that establish their rights as citizens. This change has brought greater social and educational integration of children with special needs back into the normal community and regular educational system from more segregated settings. 3 processes are observed at recent times regarding people with special needs: normalization, creation of learning and social environment as normal as possible for the child with special needs and adult. Deinstitutionalization, the process of releasing as many exceptional children and adults as possible from the confinement of residential institutions into their local community. Mainstreaming the process of bringing children with special needs into daily contact with non-exceptional children in an educational setting. Improving the social repertoire of any student is not easy, and it is especially difficult for students experiencing adaptive behavior deficits. Here are some ways to address this area in assisting children with mental retardation in classroom. Reducing social isolation. To reduce social isolation, provide opportunities for sharing experiences. Identify special interests and experiences for each of your students and plan group activities to share this information and allow students to get in to know each other. Improving self-direction and self-management. To do this, provide signals for students. Some students with mental retardation have not learned ways to let others know, and they need help. Some teachers create signal system to replace unacceptable alternatives such as blurting out, wild hand waving, and not asking. Have students practice and discuss alternative skills / the best way to react. Select program situations and discuss the best ways to react when faced with them. Have students generate, discuss and practice as many alternatives as possible. Help students keep track of good behavior. Place an index card on the corners of the students' desks to keep track of appropriate behaviors such as completing assignments and asking for help. Periodically check the cards to be sure the students are monitoring appropriate behavior. Besides, have students with mental retardation share self-reports with classmates and parents to address communication problems, which assist in promoting positive self-concepts and pride for independent life. Improving self-care, health and safety skills. To do this, have students practice and discuss appropriate behaviors. Create mock situations and have students generate, discuss and practice appropriate solutions. It is argued that the effects of hearing loss are pervasive and can create psychological stress. Children who are deaf are often passive participants in communication, as their parents or caregivers tend to deprive them from any type of interpersonal relationships, since the use and understanding of language naturally depend at first upon hearing. The more severe the deafness, the greater is the effect on verbal language development. But even mild degrees conductive deafness is thought in some cases to have a significant effect. The result of studies indicated that the performance of deaf students in the areas of reading and writing indicate that they have a great deal of difficulty in processing the language compared with hearing children. Deaf children have notable delays and substantial differences in the development of reading and writing skills. An effective communication system that permits those using it to exchange information with a high degree of ease, flexibility, speed and accuracy in a wide variety of circumstances is very essential in the process of intervention and rehabilitation process of hearing-impaired children. Generally, it appears that the extent to which a hearing-impaired child successfully interacts with family members, friends, and people in the community depends largely on the attitudes of others and the child's ability to communicate in some mutually acceptable way. Feelings of depression, withdrawal, and isolation are frequently expressed by hearing-impaired persons, particularly those who experience adventitious loss of hearing. Most hearing-impaired people are fully capable of developing positive relationships with their hearing peers when a satisfactory method of communication is used. Interventions that deal with the change of parental attitudes contribute to the alleviation of the impact of deafness on a child's social behavior. Whatever the range of visual deficit, it is crucial that any remaining vision is utilized to greater extent possible. The child needs to be encouraged to optimally utilize his or her tactile sense and auditory modality. The child, through his or her fingertips, should be able to explore, label, classify, compare and eventually read. The sense of smell alerts the blind child to danger and pleasure. The blind child, who must learn to negotiate his or her environment with little or no vision, requires added incentives to move about and explore his or her surrounding. Therefore, there is a dire need to orient the child about his or her surrounding and help him or her to be mobile and to pursue objects that are at his or her reaching. Acceptance of the child and denial of reactive are considered positive attitudes because they permit the child to develop and participate. On the other hand, overprotectiveness, open or disguised rejections are negative reactions which interfere with or stunt the child's growth. Parents need to be helped to express, recognize and eventually modify their attitudes for the mutual benefit of themselves and their children. Therefore, professionals must accept the task of lightening the load of such parents, giving them a chance to be free of guilt, remorse and resentment. Educators can help parents to find organized family support groups or introduce them to parents who are successfully coping with their child's disability. Among others, the most essential ingredients for the harmonious development of the child with visual impairment include creating loving and accepting family environment, developing positive interaction with child through encouragement of the child to talk and discuss, orienting the child about his or her surrounding through using all possible senses, that is, listening, touching, smelling and even tasting, training the child to move freely from place to place in his or her surrounding, encouraging the child to explore and trust his or her environment, making the child mingle with his or her peers in the neighborhood, assuring the safety of the home environment so that the child can freely move and will not be harmed, avoiding overprotectiveness and encouraging the child to develop self-confidence and self-reliance, and maintaining close contact with teachers of the child and seeking advice from professional parents of visually impaired children or from visually impaired adults. Although inattentive and disruptive behavior must be controlled in order to teach a child with behavior and emotional disturbance, the objective of controlling misbehavior must be balanced with a well-designed and implemented instructional program to teach academic and social skills. There are several different approaches to educate children with emotional disturbance, each with its own definitions, purposes of treatment, and types of intervention. Based on the work of Rhodes and Head, 1974, Rhodes and Tracy, 1972, and Kaufman, 1985, there are 6 categories of models. 1. Biogenetic. This model suggests that deviant behavior is a physical disorder with genetic or medical cause. It implies that these causes must treat the emotional disturbance. Treatment may be medical or nutritional. 2. Psychodynamics. Based on the idea that a disordered personality develops out of the interaction of experience and internal mental processes that are out of balance, this model relies on psychotherapy and creative projects for the child and often the parents, rather than academic remediation. 3. Psychoeducational. This model is concerned with unconscious motivations and underlying conflicts, yet stresses the realistic demands of everyday functioning in school and home, puts its emphasis on the student's emotional development and growth as on academic growth. Intervention focuses on therapeutic discussions to allow the children to understand their behavior rationally and plan to change it. 4. Humanistic. This model suggests that the disturbed child is not in touch with his or her own feelings and cannot find self-fulfillment in traditional educational settings. Treatment takes place in an open, personalized setting where the teacher themselves is a non-directive, non-authoritarian resource and catalyst for the child's training. 5. Ecological. This model stresses the interaction of the child with the people around him or her, and with social institutions. This approach considers children's problems largely emanating from social or cultural forces exerting influence on the individual. Treatment involves teaching the child to function within the family, school, neighborhood, and the large community. 6. Behavioral. This model assumes that the child has learned disordered behavior and has not learned appropriate responses. To treat the behavior disorder, a teacher uses applied behavior analysis techniques to teach the child appropriate responses and eliminate inappropriate ones. Partnership in special education roles and functions. To facilitate the organization and provision of education for students with special educational needs, schools are advised to form a special educational needs support team in a manner that matches the particular circumstances of the school. Steps have already been taken in some post-primary schools to organize such support teams. The purpose of the support team is to provide a suitable organizational structure to enable teachers in specialist roles related to inclusion to collaborate with one another and with mainstream teachers in an efficient and effective manner for the benefit of the students in their target groups. The members of the team should work collaboratively in the development, implementation and review of policies and procedures for identifying and meeting the special educational needs of individual students. The principal should lead the establishment of the special educational needs support team. The core of the support team will normally consist of the principal or deputy principal or both, the resource teacher, the learning support teacher, and the guidance counselor. The members of this core team will work closely with mainstream teachers and, as appropriate, with other specialist teachers, such as those involved in pastoral care roles, the school chaplain, the resource teacher for travelers, the English language support teacher, the homeschool community liaison coordinator, special needs assistants and other relevant staff members in providing inclusive education for students with special educational needs. Martin, 2007. The membership and remit of the Special Educational Needs Support Team should be stated in the school plan, and this should include a clarification of the role and responsibilities of each member of the core team. Meetings and consultation between members of the team will be necessary for the purpose of drawing up, monitoring the implementation of and reviewing whole school policies and procedures related to special education. Team meetings may involve other teachers by arrangement. It is advised that such meetings be arranged sufficiently far in advance to ensure the participation of the relevant teachers. Team meetings need to be carefully structured and managed so that the issues to be addressed are dealt with effectively within the time available. Unit summary. It is generally agreed that everybody should get equal opportunity to develop his or her personality, mainly when education is concerned. As indicated from different sources, it can be observed that the number of exceptional children is enormous. These children should get special attention and treatment so that they can develop to their full potential and will become contributing member of a given society. If their potentialities remain undeveloped, it would result in great wastage of human resources. Because of this, we need to make special arrangements to meet the needs of children with special preferences. The following issues can be cited as the significance in providing special needs education. Children with special needs cannot benefit much from regular classroom teaching unless necessary modifications are made. For instance, gifted students do not get appropriate motivation in regular classes. If these students are not given special treatment, they may develop behaviour problems, which may cause harm to the individual and to the society. In the same way, some group of exceptional children would find it difficult to adjust in home and society. For instance, children who are mentally and physically in problem may face the challenge mentioned. If these children are not properly educated, they cannot stand on their own to lead productive life and will become burden for the society. People who have relation with these children in one way or the other get good outlook about the problems of children with special needs if they get proper support in schools. This support system may involve their parents, educators, and administrators. When these people get insight about the problems of children with special needs, they may get known how on the process of adjusting these children to the greater society. Education should solve the problems which children with special need face in the regular school programs. In other words, when exceptional children simply made to attend regular school programs, they will become a challenge for school teachers to deal with their problems unless they are provided with special needs and inclusive educational provision trainings. In line with what have been said, children with special needs are somewhat different concerning their interest, motivation and aims of life. In order to assist these children to meet their needs, society must provide special facilities for their education. Finally, special needs and inclusive education program must meet the needs of exceptional children to bring their developmental potentialities to the maximum. In doing so, it could prepare them adequately for a satisfactory life adjustment. Academic underachievement can be caused by different factors in which learning difficulties/disabilities is a part. Scholars in the area classify learning difficulty into two. The first category is developmental learning difficulties/disabilities, in which individuals manifest problems in attention, memory, perceptual motor, thinking, language, etc. The second group is academic learning disabilities that include problems in reading, spelling, writing, and arithmetic, etc. As mentioned in Grayson 1999, advocates of inclusion believe that schools have two essential goals for students with disabilities. First, to improve their social competence and acceptance, and second, to change the attitudes and stereotype thinking of teachers and students without disabilities toward individuals with disabilities, who someday will become parents, taxpayers, and service providers. Advocates believe that this can happen only when special needs students are placed in integrated settings. The rationale for educating students with severe disabilities in integrated settings is to ensure their normalized community participation by providing them with instruction in skills essential to their success in the social and work settings in which they will ultimately use these skills. Settings that challenge inclusive schools and helping strategies are mentioned in the same as of the following. Teachers. Teachers' attitudes towards students are a major force in determining the nature of the interaction between teacher and students, and in turn affect students' achievement. Teachers' attitudes also influence the attitudes of students without disabilities towards students with disabilities. Thus, teachers' attitudes should be the first area dealt with as preparations are made to place students with disabilities in regular classrooms. Students without disabilities. Research indicates that attitudes towards students with disabilities at both the elementary and secondary school levels are conflicting. However, the bulk of evidence indicates that students without disabilities tend to reject students with disabilities. This may be due to historical practices of segregation, fear of the unknown, and negative attitudes and behaviors displayed by school personnel towards students with disabilities. Planned interactive activities involving students with disabilities and their peers without disabilities are widely recognized as important factors in successful social integration within the mainstream environment. Preparation of students without disabilities includes increasing their knowledge and information about disabilities, such as understanding the nature of the disabilities, instructional units on disabilities, simulation activities, and structured interaction strategies. And less recognized by school community, negative interaction highly impedes confidence of children with disabilities in inclusive settings. Students with disabilities. Teachers can prepare students with disabilities for the transition from the special to the regular classroom by identifying the new situations or environments, listing the activities that will be required in the new environment, specifying the skills needed to function properly, and identifying skills already mastered. The fundamental principle of inclusive education is the valuing of diversity within the human community. When inclusive education is fully embraced, we abandon the idea that children have to become normal in order to contribute to the world. We begin to look beyond typical ways of becoming valued members of the community, and in doing so, begin to realize the achievable goal of providing all children with an authentic sense of belonging. 1992. General Unit Assessment Strategy. The following are some activity questions that teachers may use to identify whether the learning outcomes are met or not. Referring to different sources, try to mention definition of the following groups of children with special needs individually. Compare your work with previous activity results. The learning disabled, communication disorder, the mentally retarded, emotionally and behaviorally disturbed, hard of hearing and deaf, the visually impaired, physical/motor-related impairment, other health impairment, children at risk, the environmentally deprived, multiple impairments. Decide the developmental profile of children with special needs and belief of inclusive education to accommodate all learners in the regular classroom settings. Determine the environmental and social challenges children with special need face in relation to the appropriate school atmosphere for all children.